Hello and welcome to the Intentional Brief, your weekly video update on the one big thing in cybersecurity for middle market companies, their investors, and management teams. I'm your host, Shay Colson, managing partner at Intentional Cybersecurity, and you can find us online at intentionalcyber.com. Today is Tuesday, December 10th, and while it's tempting to just give you some of the relevant updates to what we've been covering on the show in the past few weeks, Blue Yonder, Salt Typhoon, Transport for London, I think that actually misses the bigger story here around the long tail of cyber events. So that's what we're going to focus on today. So obviously we have talked about both these particular incidents and this notion of the long tail before, but only in passing. So I think it's worth a little bit of focus this week, given the salient examples that we have in front of us in different stages, different industries, different geographies, and different types of impact. So what do we mean by the long tail of this event? I think, quite simply, it's this idea that the impact extends far beyond whether or not a system is up, whether or not data is encrypted, whether or not breach notifications have been filed. These impacts actually ripple out for weeks, months, quarters, and sometimes even years, and often in surprising, unexpected ways, given the interconnected nature of both the society and the technology that we live in. And so obviously, the most direct way to quantify the long tail is financially, which we are getting more information about from the good folks at Transport for London, who you may recall were attacked starting in September by a single 17-year-old. And in an update provided to their board last week, they noted that they have already spent £5 million on incident response investigation and remedial cybersecurity measures in the past 3 months. And as a result, quote, previous forecasts of an operating surplus of 61 million had now been slashed to 23 million, largely due to the financial impact of the security incident. The quantified impact in the reporting that we're seeing is now at 30 million pounds and growing. And that is, again, one 17-year-old kid in a 3-month span. So the tail here really is long. Meanwhile, here in the US, the ransomware woes at third-party logistics firm Blue Yonder continue, with reports noting that they are potentially the victims of a new group of attackers known as the Termite ransomware group, a group who, quote, uses a double extortion method, extorting victims for a decryptor in order to prevent the release of stolen data. But the challenge here is that Blue Yonder is remaining extremely tight-lipped. Some in the threat intelligence space have noted that Termite is leveraging a zero-day vulnerability on a popular file-sharing appliance, which has the potential to create even more impact for them. For their part, Blue Yonder continues their pattern of minimal information obfuscation, and noting in their most recent update only that, quote, we are aware that an unauthorized third party claims to have taken certain information from our systems. We are working diligently with external cybersecurity experts to address these claims. The investigation remains ongoing, unquote, end quote. That's it. It's day 20 of this investigation. For their part, Termite is claiming on their ransomware site that they have 680 gigabytes of data from Blue Yonder, including databases, email lists, documents, reports, insurance information, and will begin sharing it soon. So it looks like things are going to get worse for Blue Yonder before they get better. Others in the U.S. remain in a really difficult position on the struggle bus as well, namely telecoms. With the impact of Salt Typhoon growing, Reuters is now reporting that the White House last week, quote, said at least 8 telecommunications and telecom infrastructure firms in the United States had been impacted, and a large number of Americans' metadata has been stolen, unquote. Now, again, metadata can tell us who's talking to whom, when, for how long, in what ways, and it is very important in terms of piecing together this big picture. In fact, the Snowden leaks spent a lot of time talking about metadata because it was a way to piece things together from this envelope information when you couldn't actually see the contents of the conversation. Only in this case, they could also see and hear the contents of those conversations across at least 8 telecom providers here in the US. So a big deal, and one that does not appear to be able to get much attention in terms of resolution. Certain senators noting this week that it will be into next year before they can pick up the issue just by the way of schedule. So my point in all of these updates is that there is always more to the story, more impact, more money, more cost, more cleanup, and that we need to do ourselves the favor of ensuring that we're planning for the scopes and impacts we're likely to actually encounter, not the ones that would be convenient for our tabletop or for our business continuity and disaster recovery plans. It's common, I think, to assume that when an incident ends, that means the systems are back up and we're done. But the truth is that that is too convenient and far from reality, and that we need to start planning accordingly. From a fundraising perspective, we're back in the middle of the pack from a numbers perspective with more than $8.8 billion in newly committed capital in the past week, although the majority of that comes from a single fund, the Singaporean sovereign wealth fund Temasek, who launched a private credit platform with a $7.5 billion initial portfolio. The Wall Street Journal has a piece out this week noting that, quote, tapped out private equity investors decline new commitments, unquote, largely as a function of their liquidity crunch, while the Financial Times is calling the $35 billion worth of U.S. M&A that was announced just yesterday Merger Monday, and attributing that to the increased certainty that's now available to investors post-election, regardless of the feelings around the outcome. So I think we're going to find ourselves in new markets with new realities, new mechanics here in 2025 and beyond. And I think the one thing in this market is cyber resilience is going to matter now more than ever. And again, our job is to plan accordingly. With that, a reminder, you can find links to all the articles we covered in the comment section below. You can find back issues and written transcripts of these videos at intentionalcyber.com. And we will see you next week for another edition of the Intentional Brief.